Have you ever received a random act of kindness that actually made things worse? No, but one that made me look like a total dong. Guy, woman, 2 young children waiting under an awning outside a movie theater as torrential rain pours down. I walk up under a nice umbrella. Feeling good, I hand it to the guy. Basically a here you go, keep it and pass it along. He thanks me profusely and walks off to his car all dry. He wasn't with a woman and her kids like I thought. Ha 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 ha. That's actually quite funny. To be fair, if he was a gent he would have then handed the brolly to her. Twice while at work, as a waitress, I've had people try to help me by removing a glass unexpectedly from the tray I was carrying holding the table's entire drink order. Both times it threw off my balance so bad the entire tray pennied it all over me and the floor, shattering the glasses. The second time it happened the guy actually said AWW you dropped it anyways as if his interference had nothing to do with it. Note, I'm a relatively small girl so people often assume I can't handle the weight of the trays. Oh my lord, I freaking hated this when I was a server. Don't frick with my trays. I have counterbalances in place. Gave a one-eyed homeless guy $5. Other homeless guys melted out of the scenery from all around like feral cats looking for a handout. I didn't give out any more money as I figured this was a bad idea. So they stabbed the one-eyed guy and took his $5. He died. I was working as a news camera guy at the time, doing stand-ups with a female reporter for a morning show. Our live hits became more and more interesting as the situation developed. When I was a teen my parents had this old friend living with us. I guess he felt like a burden on the household so he would always be trying to do things around the house to help. I had an old antique fan in my room that I ran 24/7 because it had problems starting up. I come home one day and he tells me he kindly went into my room and turned it off for me. It never started again. He spent a good chunk of time rearranging and editing my computer's desktop to make it more appealing to the eye. I felt bad, but I had to make him return it to how it was. At the time I was building a replica Ghostbusters proton pack out of foam core, and I come home from school and find that he has glued a bunch of random junk to it to help me finish it. I had to remove it all, clean up the glue, repaint, and in some cases rebuild unsalvageable parts. The guy was just trying to help. I wish I could go back and better keep my cool about it, but being a teen it frustrated me to no end. About a month ago my car overheated on the highway. I pulled over and couldn't get it to start again but didn't have enough money for a tow truck. A guy stopped to help me, claiming he was a mechanic and offered to tow my car back to my apartment on his truck. I was skeptical but we were close to my place and I didn't really have any other options. He tied up my car to his truck and I was inside my car to steer it. Well, this guy sped up as soon as we got on the highway. The rope snapped and flung my car in front of his, slammed me into the guardrail, then spun out of control across the highway and crashed into a concrete wall on the opposite side. I woke up in the hospital and the Good Samaritan fled the scene. Today you, tomorrow me, he whispered threateningly as he fled the scene. When I was headed home from college one weekend with my girlfriend, we got a flat tire on the interstate. I pulled over and started changing the tire in the emergency lane. I quickly realized that the spare I was trying to put on had the wrong lug set. I bought the car used, and the person I bought it from evidently put a spare that didn't fit into the trunk. About that time, a police officer stopped behind us and asked if we needed help. I told him what happened and he called a tow truck for us and told us to sit tight until they got there. My girlfriend and I were standing around outside the vehicle when it suddenly dawned on me that standing on the side of the road while cars whizzed by at 80 miles per hour was not very smart. We decided to get back in the car and put our seatbelts back on. We hadn't been in the car for more than a minute before we hear this god-awful screeching noise. All of a sudden, we see a Toyota Tundra being pushed off the road, into the ditch, and nearly into the trees by a Honda Accord full of people. Keep in mind, all of this is happening at interstate speed, 70-80 mph. They barely missed the front of our vehicle, seemingly by just a few feet. Our car was pelted by gravel and surrounded by tire smoke as they screeched by. Both cars came to a stop about 75-100 yards in front of us. The Accord in the grass and the Tundra at the bottom of the ditch. My girlfriend and I both just sat there in shock for a second. After I got over the initial WTF just happened moment, I got out of the car and ran up to the tundra that had stopped just short of the trees at the bottom of a steep embankment. I asked if the guy was okay, and he was, but he seemed majorly pee off. Rightfully so considering he was almost just killed. I went up to the Accord and it was a car full of teenagers. I asked if they were okay, and they were. The driver of the Accord said I was just trying to help man. We were stuck out here the other day with a flat and didn't get help for 3 hours. I told him that while I appreciated his goodwill, we already had help coming and we were going to be leaving any moment. You should have seen the look on his face. Evidently the Accord started out in the far left lane. There were 2 lanes headed eastbound when they spotted us on the side of the road. The driver made the noble decision to help out, but failed to check his surroundings before trying to switch from the far left lane to the emergency lane on the far right. The Tundra was traveling in the lane between the Accord and the emergency lane. When the Accord hit the Tundra, either the Accord driver panicked, didn't notice, or was a complete moron, because he kept pushing to get to the emergency lane, never letting up on his commitment to reach the other side of the road. A few minutes later our tow truck showed up and we left the Good Samaritans and their victim behind. The guy's heart was in the right place, but he quite obviously shouldn't have a driver's license if that's how aware of his surroundings he is. When I was a little kid, I asked my mom for candy at the checkout and she told me no. I guess I looked really bummed out, because the cashier just said I could take one. My mother smiled and thanked her. I thought everything was fine, until we got home. She spanked me on the butt for making her look like a bad mother. Luckily it didn't really hurt and just confused the frick out of me. So much so that I don't really interact with other people's kids for fear of sending them to a similar fate. No offense, but frick her, that is horrible. I did laundry for my wife one time, and just put her stuff in the dryer. Ruined $300 of clothes. On the plus side, she never complains about me not doing laundry anymore. The secret to happiness exactly this. If someone asks you to do something you hate, you just frick it up horribly and they'll never ask again. A few years ago my dad was mowing our lawn and our neighbor offered him his riding mower for the day. We have a decent sized yard so it probably would have taken a third the time, but my dad kindly said no thanks and continued on. The neighbor insisted again and again so eventually my dad gave in. The lawn mower ended up breaking and the guy made us pay to get it fixed, which ended up being several $100s. Obviously, since my dad was the one operating it when it broke, he gave the neighbor the money. But I did learn something that day. When someone rejects your offer, let it go. This is why I don't let other people carry or move expensive things I own. If I drop it and it breaks, I'm disappointed in myself. If they drop it and it breaks, I'm pissed. I'd rather just avoid the possibilities and make me solely responsible for the condition of that thing. I have came close rear-ending people on the interstate several times because they thought they were being nice to someone else. Traveling down the interstate at 75 miles per hour when the car in front of me sees someone waiting at a short on-ramp. Short on-ramps are common in cities to join the traffic. So the person in front of me thinks he or she is being nice by slowing down or stopping on the interstate. WTF. To let the person on the ramp into traffic. But they never consider the traffic behind them. Not only do I have to cram on the brakes and try to avoid the butthole who just stopped in front of me for no apparent reason, I also have to worry if the guy behind me is going to manage to stop before he hits me. I've been told by a cop that he would pull people over for this. I'm no expert in traffic laws, but apparently that can count as reckless driving. Makes sense to me. I took a lost dog home and called the number on his tags. The owner accused me of stealing his dog. When I returned it to him, he was working as a security guard at a local business not far from where I had found the dog wandering alone. We had a fight and I told him he could frick off. He said, "What did you say?" So I repeated at the top of my lungs. I said, "You can frick off," and I cried all the way home. Should have just dropped off the dog at the local pound and told him to go pick it up over there. That's what I would have done if someone got nasty to me over the phone. Certainly not a good idea to meet them in person. I rent part of my house out, and one tenant volunteered to help with the yard work, just because he liked gardening. I pulled up all those weeds in the front. What weeds in the front? He had pulled up all of my perennial daisies. I mowed down all of those weeds in the back. What weeds in the back? There went my entire hollyhock patch. I fertilized the lawn for you. What fertilizer did you use? That big sack that I found in the basement. On a 200 square foot patch of lawn he had used a sack of fertilizer designed to fertilize a 20,000 square foot lawn. There went my lawn. Dead due to fertilizer burn. Please don't help me with the yard work anymore, okay? The guy missed his calling as a plant exterminator. The problem with any act of kindness is that just because you think you are helping someone does not mean you are not in any way making the situation worse. I do volunteer work in developing countries and I see this all the time. People think that by painting a fence, drilling a well, or giving food they are helping, but in reality they may very well be hurting. Wouldn't it have been better to hire a local to paint that fence, so that he can be employed? That well is on the largest underground water reserve for miles. But is it so close to a nearby graveyard that locals won't use it due to their customs, religion, superstitions? Meaning you wasted months of planning and 20k to build a well that no one will use? Because you handed out free food? Is a local farmer unable to sell his crops? I see these things happen all the time. You have to be very self-critical when you are helping people. You have to be able to take a step back and ask, what are the possible negative implications if I were to interfere? I was getting a burger to go and remembered seeing a homeless guy a couple blocks down, so I order a second for him. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Take it over to him. He says that he can't accept it. It's too much. It was from a fancy restaurant, but I insist. Went home, ate my burger, and promptly got food poisoning. I felt terrible but just hoped his stomach was stronger than mine. Also, I didn't get him a drink. I am a monster. I saw the guy in a wheelchair trying to get into a shop that had a few steps in front of its door. When I tipped him back to get him up the first step, I wasn't expecting him to weigh as much as an anvil. He ended up falling, wheelchair and all, on top of me. Awkward. TLDR. Pushed over a cripple trying to help him. Yesterday morning, my car was at the shop to get checked. I need front brakes. My son said do not pay for brakes. I can do that for you. Would you rather pay $200 for the job or $30 for the parts? So I kinda embarrassingly told my mechanic that my son is gonna do it for me and I'm going to pick up the car. He kindly didn't charge any diagnostic fee or anything and I said I'll still be back. This is the only auto repair he knows how to do. Son's done his own several times. He does know how. Well, trouble arose at step 1. The lug nuts on my car got stripped on the way out. Son said ill-fitting wrench supplied with car caused it. He changed brake pad on one side despite the trouble, but then couldn't get all lug nuts back on. Tried on other side, same thing. Bought new lug nuts, didn't help. Stem is stripped. So now, I have to go back to the shop and ask, can I drive the car here for you to fix the brakes and the stems? Or do I have to be towed? Oh boy. He tried though. Was just trying to save him mom some cash. But boy. When I was in high school I took bus to school in the morning. I usually make a point to give up my seat for women, elderly or parents with young kids. So there was this older gentleman that came on the bus with his kid, probably around 6-8, stands in front of me. Mind that, at the time bus was crowded and full of people going to work and high school kids. I didn't think much so I got up and said, why don't you take the seat? He replied with no thanks with a very stern face. I was puzzled for a second. Then I realized he was offended because he thought I think he was old, probably in his 40s. So I quickly corrected myself and said, why don't you let your son take my seat then? But he looked even angrier and said it's okay. At that point I was kinda embarrassed and sat back down. I avoided eye contact the rest of the way. As a kid, maybe 10, I decided to bake a cake while my parents were away for a couple of hours. I had the recipe and all the ingredients, but I lacked the basic knowledge about baking. So after like half an hour mix was ready to bake. Unfortunately I made slightly more dough than I was supposed to, so I decided to put it into a pot and fry it. And that's exactly what I did. Approx 40 minutes later, when I was playing outside with my sister, parents came home, and I was so proud and happy that I could show them how much I cared about them and made them a cake. That lasted until we entered the house. It was filled with smoke. I've no idea why fire alarm didn't go off, but heck, Everything was covered in smoke. In the kitchen, total mayhem. The fried cake was totally burned because I've set heat on max. Add to it completely ruined some cloth and other utensils. My friends weren't really happy, but the cake that was inside the oven was quite good. Well, at least now I know how to cook and it has become my passion after work. When my sister was little, she tried to make brownie mix. Unfortunately, she misread 112 cups of water as 11.5 cups of water. When she showed my mom, she asked for a bigger bowl. There was apparently an enormous bowl of water with a little island of brownie mix floating on top. When I was in middle school, I was at a supermarket waiting in line with my mom to pay for her groceries when I saw kid 4-6 staring longingly at the candy machine. I happened to have a quarter, a lot of money to me back in the day, in my pocket and went over to give it to him, only to have the mother rush over and yell at me for giving him access to candy. As a kid, I didn't understand why a random act of kindness would cause someone to get mad at me, and then they walked off with my quarter. AWW, that's so sad. And people wonder why altruism is rare. Bought a depressed and addiction-prone friend a copy of WoW. Didn't realize the addictive potential of it at the time. If your friend was depressed and addiction-prone in the first place, perhaps you did good. It's a much healthier addiction than any substance abuse, and the placebo sense of purpose it gives is beneficial to someone who'd otherwise just sit there staring at the wall. There were a few times at my old job where I'd upgrade a customer's drink size for free, just because they were super nice or something. One time I gave a woman a large when she ordered a small because it was super hot outside and I thought maybe she'd like more. But she actually snapped at me and told me off because apparently she was dieting and now felt compelled to drink the larger size. Lol. I felt so dumb. I was repainting my room and my friend kept insisting on helping. He is a huge klutz, so I was really reluctant. After insisting, I finally caved and asked him to help paint the sides of the wall with a special square sponge brush made for clean edges. I told him to apply some pressure so you get an even coat. He starts and after about a beater he slips and paints all over my baseboard and floor. Furious, I quickly grab the paint thinner and clean up his mess. Fast forward an hour later, he starts again complaining about how he is bored and wants to help. Again I say no and tell him to just stay on my bed and use my laptop, but he insists. As soon as he gets up from my bed to help, he steps on a paint mixing stick that was in a paint can and flings the paint can across my room, getting paint all over the floor and my bed. At this point I escort him out of my house and cry. When someone holds the door for you but it's at that awkward distance and you have to run, would much prefer to walk at a slow pace and open the door myself. As someone who holds the door open for people, I always assume they will continue at the same pace they had been walking. No one's asking you to run. Every time someone tells me to smile, I don't want to smile. Damn it. Maybe I'm having a bad day and you've just made it worse by noticing that I'm having a bad day. I was on Beale Street in Memphis, TN, sort of a budget bourbon saint, and this guy came up asking for money to stay in the local shelter for the night. I figured he would use it to buy beer and drugs, but so what, right? So I gave him $5. No big deal, a little good deed to help the world go round. Holy crap. After that it was like Resident Evil, just with homeless guys instead of zombies. They were swarming and I wasn't allowed to put two in their heads to save myself. I made my escape into a hard rock cafe. They milled around outside for a bit, but eventually shuffled off in search of more accessible money. Once I had had lunch and the coast was clear, I made a break for my hotel. Never again. When I was 12, my parents went on a trip and my siblings and I stayed at a friend's house. My father had put the lawn sprinklers on a timer. While they were away, some missionaries from the church walked by the house and saw the water running. They knew no one was home and we were poor, so they decided to do a good deed and turned the timer off. They didn't know how it worked and did not turn off the water. This caused a big leak that flooded our basement with 10 inches of water. When my parents got home they picked me up first and I ran downstairs to my bedroom and into 10 inches of water. Almost everything was ruined. This was especially bad because my dad had hoarded all sorts of crap in his office. We're talking real hoarding, like crap piled 5 feet high. The church offered to help clean things up, but there was so much stuff in my dad's office that they had to create the opposite of a bucket line to get all the crap out. My mom was so embarrassed she basically had a meltdown. Good times. I was DDing my drunk friends home at night after a snowstorm, and on a sharp turn downhill, my car slipped on ice and became stuck in a snow mound. Since this was a rural road, not many people drove on it, but a woman drove by and saw us stuck. She asked if we needed help, but we said it's okay, we have AAA coming. Instead she insisted on helping and ended up calling the local cops to help us, believing they will be there for our benefit. However, it being a college town, the cops came in 2 squad cars from both directions of the road ready to arrest drunk underage kids. However, when they got there they saw I was not drunk and everyone was well over 21, and interrogated us. Then for some reason or another, since they did not get to arrest anyone, they felt compelled to impound my car and cite me with speeding over 55 plus on a 30-mile-per-hour zone. No proof since they weren't present, driving to endanger criminal offense, and failing to stay in marked lanes. Once I got to court I found out they made up reasons for the charges, including that I told multiple cops different stories raising their suspicion. However, I only spoke with one cop that night. In the end the whole ordeal cost me over $1,000 in court cop fees, lawyer fees, impound fees, and time from work. Long story short, car stuck in snow. Nice lady calls cops thinking they will help us out. Butthole cops come ready to arrest people, realize they have nothing and cite me with everything possible. Here we go. One time in college, I was in the computer lab getting my essay on. I took a break to rest my eyes, look around, and see this girl sitting behind me, trying to read a PDF from the computer with her head turned 90 degrees. I thought someone had better help her out, so I rolled up in my computer chair behind her and said in a quiet voice, "You know you can rotate that." Freaked the heck out of her. Once she was done being freaked out, she said it's fine, I'm almost done, and proceeded to finish it with her head cocked 90 degrees. Last week I was waiting at a stoplight when I noticed a person just ahead who was waiting to back out of a street parking spot. There was no one behind me, so I backed up a little bit so they could get out of their spot and make the light. Yay me. As the guy backed out of the spot he was not paying close enough attention to the car in front of me. He knocked off his own bumper and smashed up the back of the other car pretty well considering it was a low impact crash. I felt terrible. When I was younger I was driving along and saw a fire hydrant gushing water with extreme force. So forceful was it that I figured that it would be pretty dangerous to any kid that decided to try to play in it, or ride a bike in front of it. I grabbed a wrench and went over and shut it off. Next thing I knew, a utilities truck rolled up and the guy in it was yelling at me not to leave. Then the cops came, and everyone was treating me like some king of vandal, and threatening to arrest me. Turns out that the utility worker had opened it to relieve pressure, and by turning it off, I caused a water main to burst. I never got in trouble, but I heard later that the utility worker sure did for leaving it unattended. I'm terrified of falling, dropping, being up high, so one day my dad forced me to get in line for the Tower of Terror. I was like FML, but the wait was 3 hours long. My dad was like, "Frick, I guess we are not going on, you got lucky." Then out of nowhere this couple came up to us and was like, "Oh, we see you are leaving the line. We got these fast passes and we decided we are tired and just want to go home." They hand my dad the fast passes. He looks at me with the biggest smile I have ever seen him have. End of the story. I was terrified and my dad has a copy of me looking white as a ghost and almost dead somewhere hidden in the house just for his enjoyment. I was driving through Starbucks and ordered my regular, a grand black coffee for $1.95. When I get to the window and tried to pay, the clerk excitedly told me that previous customer had decided to pay it forward and pay for my order. "Oh, okay, thanks," I say. Then she looks at me with earnest puppy dog eyes and says, "Why don't you keep the chain going and pay for the person behind you?" So I said, "Okay, whatever," and gave her my debit card, and when she hands back the receipt it was for like 3 mocha frappa extra candy floss triple shot cappuccinos, which came to around $15. That good deed made my freaking day. That drive-thru server was a troll. Not sure if this counts, but I asked my friend to help me with a girl I was into. He said sure. I introduced them and they ended up dating. This has happened to me too. It's a bad deal, huh? People I don't know kept buying me drinks my 21st birthday just a few days ago. This was on top of all the bars giving free shots to anyone on their birthday already. Smiled and thanked them. Secretly wanted to kill them. I'm a workaholic, and once I start a task I just want to do it to completion. If left to my own devices I work fast and throughout the day without breaks. That's how I like it, but my boss tells me to take breaks every hour and enforces it. He thinks he is being kind, but it makes me rage. It might be a legal sire thing. There are laws saying workers must be given breaks, so he may be making you take the break so that you can't later claim he was breaking the law. That's how it was at one of my summer jobs. A couple of guys were pushing a car stuck in the snow. I offered to help, and one of them attacked me with a snow shovel, screaming, "I'll kill you." I was at an intersection of a gridlocked 4-lane major street with a side street. A girl on the side street wanted to turn left, and I made room for her. She gave me the nicest thank you smile, then blew into her turn without much caution, getting whacked by an oncoming car. In the 90s, a girl from my town went snowmobiling and ending up crashing her sled by the highway. She needed medical attention and didn't think she could drive her sled home. Luckily, an older lady in a car pulled over to the side of the highway and offered a ride to the hospital in town. The girl accepted and got into the passenger seat. The driver then proceeded to pull onto the highway right into the path of a truck doing 65, killing the girl instantly. No good deed goes unpunished. Neither a borrower nor a lender beat Hill from Google that my granddad didn't come up with this. My wife's boss gave us a large turkey around Christmas. It was unexpected and really uncharacteristic for her to be so generous. My wife politely accepted, even though we're vegetarians. We had to move everything out of our freezer just for this giant bird to fit in there. We eventually found someone else to take it. Watch out. Next year the boss might presume you enjoyed the turkey so much that they give you another one. Yeah, I was at the beach a few weeks back and I'm walking through the parking lot. I see a car with the trunk popped open. It was sitting almost closed, but it wasn't latched. I walked up like a boss and closed it to be a nice guy and make sure nothing was stolen. The dang car alarm goes off, and I got questioned by beach security, FML. One time walking into the gym, I noticed a brand new Corvette C6Z06 parked next to it to get a little look-see, and noticed the keys had been left in the back hatch keyhole. This was in a vast, largely unused parking lot. I took the keys to the front desk. I better have gotten a shitload of karma that day. There should be a word for this, kind of like schadenfreude. Any ideas? German has a word for this one too. Borendienst. We have an expression of the same literal meaning in Russian. Medvezhaya. It means a bear's service or bear's favor. Comes from a somewhat brutal La Fontaine fable about a bear who swatted a fly on his human friend's face. I was working as a pizza delivery driver during college, and on one run at night I had left my door slightly open as I went to their door. They came out to meet me, so I never got to see inside the house. When I got back to my car and headed to the store, I noticed that I had picked up a passenger. A tiny kitten had jumped into my car and was lounging in my back seat. Now, this kitten was the absolutely most adorable thing in the entire world, and I instantly fell in love with him. I deemed it fate that I was meant to have this little ball of cute since he had found me, wasn't tagged, and had come from a pretty sketchy neighborhood. He hung out in my car for the rest of the night as I finished my shift, and I made it my plan to keep him. However, I knew he wasn't mine, and came to grips knowing I'd have to return him. Like a big sensitive Sally, I got teary-eyed and took him back to the house I had found him. I explained the story, but much to my sadness they didn't care even a little bit. They grabbed him, tossed him into a disgustingly dirty living room with a few other kittens shuffling about, and shut the door. I knew they didn't even realize he had gone missing. I know it would have been stealing, so it's not really the same as doing the right thing. but I immediately regretted taking him back and still to this day hope he wasn't neglected and abused as I suspect he might have been. Last week I sent flowers to a girl I've been chatting with online with for a couple of weeks. She admired me. I admired her, from afar, but admired nonetheless. We did cutesy things, like talk to each other until we fell asleep on webcam, then woke up and said hi in the morning. Anyway, I sent flowers to her job, and now she doesn't talk to me anymore. Kind gesture, but it was treated as if I was asking her to marry me or something. Since I didn't get any karma for this in real life, on a lovely Sunday afternoon much like today, I walked to a lakeside cafe on the edge of town for a nice sandwich, glass of wine, and perhaps some coffee. The trip's about an hour each way, but my iPod and I happen to enjoy walking as well as vitamin D. Today learn comments I whoop, and I can catch a bus home if I don't mind waiting for it. I was walking through a business park near the lake when I saw a car make a slow stop and then cautiously turn. Figuring that she was having trouble getting back to the nearby expressway, and having already saved more than a few lost souls, all glory to Google Maps, I yelled, "Are you lost?" but got no response and kept walking. I reached the next corner to find that the same car had gone around the block and was just now passing me again. Again I yelled. Again, no response. Figuring that they hadn't heard me either time, I waited a bit to see if they'd come around once more. This time, I made sure to walk into the street and wait so that they'd see me. As I made eye contact with the driver, her passenger yells, "Will you just leave us alone, please?" and the driver keeps driving. I then realized that the passenger was a father who had taken his daughter out for driving lessons in a business park on the edge of town on a Sunday afternoon, as nobody would disturb them there. I also realized that they had heard me all 3 times but decided to ignore me until it was apparent that I needed to be told to frick off. After suppressing homicidal thoughts for a few minutes, I collected myself and made my way to the cafe. Of course, as one might expect on a lovely Sunday afternoon, it was absolutely packed. Feeling generally disgusted, I continued to suppress homicidal thoughts for the next hour as I walked back home. There were still dongs. You just trying to be nice. The smart thing for them to do was to say, "No thank you," and then be on their way. Tada. Problem solved. But then again I guess people expect mind-reading powers. Was in Myanmar last spring with my pal. We were in a horse and buggy and needed to make a pit stop, so we asked a little girl at a monastery we passed if there was a bathroom. Along with another kid, they led us across the monastery to a WC. After using the toilet, we found the girl and boy waiting for us outside asking for a tip for bringing us there. My buddy gave the girl what was equivalent to $25. I gave $1 to the boy, lacking change and feeling generous. Jealous that I'd given the boy more, the girl started cursing at us and screamed at us all the way out of the monastery. Then after we'd hit the road and horse took off, 3 other children who'd seen us handing out tips chased us by foot, crying and begging for more money until our driver had outrun them. They finally gave up and stood in the road watching us, in a cloud of dust stirred up by our carriage. I've never felt so horrible in my life, and I'll never forget the looks on their faces. When I was really little, maybe 5 or 6, my mom locked her keys inside her car. She was really distraught because of an unmissed appointment, and went off to make a phone call quick. I was sitting beside the car when in a mad fit of brilliance I decided to help her out by opening the driver's side window with a rock. A couple minutes later my mom comes back, sees my crafty handiwork, and just slumps down on the ground. 7 minutes later the locksmith pulls up. Everyone had a good laugh in the end, and by everyone I mean the locksmith. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.